This video is a presentation by Glenn Mullin, well-known Buddhist author, teacher, and leader of spiritual pilgrimages to Tibet, Mongolia, and Nepal. Glenn lived in Dharamsala, India for 12 years, where he learned the Tibetan language and studied the Buddhist Enlightenment tradition under 35 of the greatest living masters of the 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism. Glenn is the author of over 20 books on Tibetan Buddhism, including The Practice of Kalachakra and Female Buddhas. He's written 10 of the 20 books on the lives and works of the Dalai Lamas. Some of his Dalai Lama books include The 14 Dalai Lamas and selected works from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 7th, and 13th Dalai Lamas, as well as the Dalai Lamas on Tantra. The Tantric spiritual path of Tibetan Buddhism is a hastened path of enlightenment. Historically, many Tantric practitioners have quickly achieved enlightenment, some achieving enlightenment in one lifetime. They followed in the steps of the Buddha, who long ago achieved enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Over the years, some of the Dalai Lamas and Panchen Lamas condensed the many Tantric teachings into 5 main teachings. They said, if you want to have a quicker enlightenment, you have to do only 5 main things. They called it easy enlightenment, and it is open to everyone.
Some time ago, I gave a talk in New Mexico on the subject of easy enlightenment. Friends of mine in Denver, Colorado, thought that the ideas in this talk were very relevant to peoples today, and thought it would be great to take the audio from it and add visuals. So what you're going to see now is a result of that effort. The idea of easy enlightenment isn't something I made up. It comes from the Tibetan tradition known as Jangjub Delam, which means the easy path to enlightenment. And that's based in a passage by the 5th Dalai Lama, who said, enlightenment is easy, like an artist making a masterpiece. He just does stroke by stroke, moment by moment, and keeping each moment perfect, eventually he produces a perfect masterpiece. In that same way, if we live each moment of our life breath by breath and day by day, applying the tools and technology of enlightenment, we very quickly arrive at that place of full actualization of our potential. Over the centuries, this lineage passed from the 5th Dalai Lama to his disciple, the great 2nd Panchen Lama, who passed it to his disciple, the great 7th Dalai Lama, and in that way it came down to us today. And well, I hope you enjoy the production that has been done, and that in some way it will push you a little bit in the direction of enlightenment, cause easy enlightenment to fall into the very palm of your hand. I thought to do the talk tonight on easy enlightenment because often in the West we have this idea that enlightenment is something very remote, something very hard.
We hear stories in history of masters who achieved enlightenment through very austere, difficult practices. People like Milarepa, who lived in a cave for 18 years, or Bodhidharma, who sat facing a blank wall for 9 years, and so on. And of course these cases are inspiring, But we should remember, Milarepa actually had a hard enlightenment, not an easy enlightenment, because he began his life by murdering 32 people. So if we haven't murdered 32 people, our enlightenment shouldn't be so difficult. And similarly with Bodhidharma, I don't know if his enlightenment was so difficult, but the way he taught enlightenment in those early days in China was something of a difficult path, you could say, a challenging path. I'd like to add that I didn't make up the phrase easy enlightenment. I stole it. And I stole it from one of my favorite Dalai Lamas, the great fifth Dalai Lama. And he wrote in one of his books, enlightenment is easy. It's like an artist making a masterpiece. If you know how to do it, it's easy. One stroke, one stroke, one stroke, and soon the masterpiece is finished. The masterpiece in this case is a piece of clay statue, and in that way we have the clay of our own enlightenment. We don't have to look for it somewhere. We don't have to go out and get it from somewhere. We have it completely with us from the very moment of our birth. Or you want to go the Buddhist way, we could say we've had it since millions and trillions of lifetimes, since primordial time. But at least from the moment of our birth, we have had the clay of our own enlightenment right there with us. And all we have to do, as the fifth Dalai Lama says, is shape it into the form of a Buddha, shape it into the form of an enlightened being. He then goes on in these texts to explain how we do that shaping, how we take the clay of ordinariness and transform it into the form of a Buddha. And later, one of his spiritual heirs, the second Panchen Lama, went on to write a book called Jangjub Delam, which literally means the easy path to enlightenment. And it was basically, again, like me, he stole the title from the fifth Dalai Lama. And with the same basic idea that if we make the efforts, or if we direct our life in a particular way, enlightenment is right there. And this theme, we can see it in many other texts written in Tibetan. Another very famous Tibetan text is called Lamrim Lakkyang, which means holding enlightenment in the palm of your hand. Holding enlightenment in the palm of your hand. This became a very famous book, and it was written, I guess, in the 1920s. So most Tibetans who came to India in 1959 and 1960s, that was one of the great classics that they studied. And I'd even go so far as to say I think every Yellow School or Dalai Lama School Lama who achieved enlightenment in the 20th century relied very heavily upon holding enlightenment in the palm of your hand.
Most people who achieved enlightenment in one lifetime did so by relying upon what we call Menga. That means a direct oral instruction from a master who himself achieved enlightenment.
The enlightenment method is the Menga, the direct oral instruction coming from a master who achieved enlightenment. And I decided that what I would talk about would be the method of easy enlightenment that comes from, originally in Tibet, from the Drikung Kagyu school, and from Drikung Kagyu school came into the Dalai Lama lineage. Lama Tsongkhapa himself studied in Drikung Til, the Drikung Kagyu monastery, for about 5 years. And from Jigden Sumgun, the great forefather founder of the Drikung school, this Menga was how he himself achieved enlightenment. And then over the centuries to follow, it's said that this method alone produced hundreds of thousands of enlightened beings. In fact, it still continues to do so.
They point out that if you want to achieve enlightenment in one lifetime, there's only 5 things you really have to do. You don't have to do thousands and thousands of different practices. This is important because it's said that Buddha gave 84,000 teachings.
And any of you who have been around Tibetan Buddhism, you'll probably notice that a lot of Tibetan Buddhists tend to be a little bit greedy when it comes to teachings. The more teachings and the more initiations they can attend, the happier they are. But for the individual looking for enlightenment, most important is to just find the way where you yourself can achieve that enlightenment.
So Jigden Sumgun pointed out that there's really only 5 things we need to do. The first of those is the practice of and meditation on Bodhichitta, or universal love and compassion.
To learn to look upon other living beings like the reincarnations of your own mom and your own dad, and then to think of how mom and dad are always nice to you, even when they're like mean. They're only mean to be nice. They're mean when they mean to be nice, and they're nice when they mean to be nice. And how interconnectivity is there with all living beings. And Tibetans have a wonderful saying. They don't say other sentient beings or just sentient beings. They always say Ma Semchen. Ma Semchen means all mother sentient beings. Always looking upon every other person. Like when I look at Gyalwar Rinpoche, Dalai Lama, I always think, gosh, he was my mom one time. And of course, that's why we like them today, because we have that connection. I was at a conference last night up in Boulder, Colorado, and the Sakyong Rinpoche, the Nipam Chögyam Trungpa's elder son, was talking. One thing he pointed out when he was talking is often we think we practice love or compassion and that's beneficial for other people. And we're practicing it in order to benefit other people. Like when you look at someone you really don't like, and you don't like them, you look at them, you practice seeing as your mother, remembering the kindness of the mother, the wish to repay the kindness of the mother, and to hold that love, the thought of love, compassion, joy for that person, to wish to share joy with that person. Is that it sounds like we're doing something good for them. You know, like if you're a very unpleasant person and I'm nice to you, loving to you, it sounds like I'm doing you a favor. But what's important to remember, really, the main person who benefits from practicing love, compassion, sharing joy is the one who practices. You're actually doing yourself the favor. And in the Jigden Sumgun tradition, when you practice love and compassion, the more you practice it, the happier you become as a person. Also, Dalai Lama writes in one of his books, nobody likes a grump, nobody likes an unpleasant person, and nobody likes a really difficult, obnoxious person. Everyone likes someone who is kind, generous, joyful, and loving. So in being kind, generous, joyful, and loving, you become an object of other beings' affections in return. And when you only return negative energy with negative energy, then the opposite happens. So Jigden Sumgun points out, we don't have to do a lot for our enlightenment. We have to do 5 things, and this is the first.
He says the second thing we have to do is called in Tibetan latrub, which literally means accomplishing or living like a deity, learning to be like a playful god or goddess. Always trying to have the sense of your own joyful, playful, God, goddess nature. The yoga of divine playfulness or divine joyful sportivity.
Naropa, in one of his commentaries, says that what that really refers to, first is leaving the mind in a state, just leaving in a state of unformed radiance. Just feeling the natural radiance of your being. Secondly, it's feeling the bliss or pleasure of your being. And thirdly, it's not letting the mind get tied up in concepts or conceptuality. Namtok Mepa, non-conceptuality, but non-conceptuality there also means not feigning emotions, not feigning thoughts, not holding to ideas of self, other in particular ways. Having a sort of a playful, sportive approach to who you think you are and who you think others are. And sometimes this is often, in Dalai Lama in one of his books comments, this is the essence of all tantric practice. What distinguishes tantric practice is this idea of tantric theater or divine theater. The sense that I'm a Buddha form, I'm a Buddha being, and not allowing the ordinary senses of things to become the dominant factor. And when you look at another person, that being is a tantric god, goddess, not allowing the ordinary appearance to hold power over us. Like, why do I think I am a particular way, and why do I think you are a particular way? Buddhist thinking is that it's just preconditioning. Yesterday you're nice to me, I like you. Yesterday you're mean to me, I don't like you. Our emotions are based on those kind of random experiences. I like this kind of a person, I am this kind of a person. Those concepts give us our ego image. So this reified or created sense of self, sense of others, rather than being a tool for successful, happy living, easily just becomes a cause of conflict and friction. If I don't know myself, I don't know yourself. If one doesn't know self, one doesn't know other. So rather than deal with the falsely constructed self, to just develop a yogic sense of ego. I am this radiant, joyful, unfixed or unfixable being. And then wherever one goes, one becomes a perfect being for that situation. Put another way, whatever situation one encounters becomes the perfect situation for one's own successful living. It means at all times to be radiant, to be joyful, and to be without fixed sense of self.
Thirdly, Jigdan Sunggun says we have to learn to be halfway between is and is not. To learn to poise the mind between complete belief in what we are experiencing and complete disbelief in what we are experiencing. In other words, halfway between, the Tibetan word is nangchok and tangchok, in the direction that something seems to be happening and in the direction of complete emptiness.
On the one hand, it seems like we have a real room, a real being, a real thing, a real this, that, and the other. On the other hand, when we really look at it, when we look into things and we see, is this what it appears, things immediately lose their nature of their appearance. A river seems solid from a distance, a mirage, a rainbow, and so forth. They all seem something very other than what they actually are.
There's what it seems like is happening, and on the other hand, how absolutely nothing of that is really what is happening. So when we say emptiness in Buddhism, it doesn't mean nothing in that sense. It means that what we think is there, there's nothing of that actually there. It's the same as when we think, who am I? and we come up with the sense of who I am. Unless we have meditated or studied the nature of self very deeply and analyzed deeply, we have to say in Buddhism that there is zero of what you think you are. We are as different from what we think we are as we could possibly be, as are others.
In a way, it's like a vase. The Tibetans have this thing called, in a Pramana logic, called the dokpa, the opposite of something. How do we know what is a vase? We identify a vase by isolating it from everything that is not a vase. And if we look at this cup, how do we get this cup in our mind? We get the image of it by eliminating the rest of the universe. In other words, the cup isn't really the cup for us. It's the absence of trees and cars and houses and everything else. So this third point, firstly believing in the cup, therefore we can hold it up and drink water. I believe something about myself and therefore I can act and do. A banker can be a banker, and a husband can be a husband, and a kid can be a kid, and so on.
We have to believe that enough to be able to actually do something and keep our arms and legs moving. And on the other hand, we have to hold it sufficiently lightly that we don't become just that. We aren't limited by that simple intellectual construct of who and what we are. Intellectual, emotional, conceptual. In Buddhism, those are a kind of big trap.
We can do everything in life effortlessly, but yet we're not limited by anything in life. And we hold it halfway means that nothing ever becomes an anchor, or nothing ever becomes a burden. Nothing ever becomes something which holds us down or harms us.
Without that, it's said that when we look at things that are attractive, we like them, we want them, and then our happiness comes to depend upon them. And we look at things we don't like and have aversion for, and then our happiness is dependent upon their absence. When we can live halfway between is and is not, then whatever arises is always manageable, without the slightest veering or detouring from the way.
And there's a couple of great statements for that. The most wonderful 11th century Indian master, Atisha, who came to Tibet in 1042. In one of his verses, he said, "Why do people run around chasing objects of pleasure? It's so silly. The fruits of pleasure hang from the fruit trees, richly laden, and hang over the path to enlightenment. You don't need to leave the path of enlightenment to find any pleasure. All the ordinary pleasures are there in spiritual life without any need for any extra effort. When you make effort, then basically you lose the way." His meaning is like that. In one of his texts, the seventh Dalai Lama, who's my personal favorite, he puts it that when we don't rest in that place of Mahamudra, the great refuge between is and is not, then when we see things we like, we become addicted to them. And when we see things we don't like, we become fearful and we run from them. And he said we must learn to be like the elephant, unmovable, can be moved by nothing. No need for attraction to one thing or repulsion for another. It just walks like a king, but without any distortion of its natural grace. What's the difference between Mahamudra and laziness? Because in Mahamudra, it's doing everything without effort and not having a need to do anything. So on the one hand, it could be like laziness, but on the other hand, you can do everything effortlessly.
So the third point is, if we can see between what is and is not, everything is done effortlessly and without distortion. And then we are free from all limitations, free from limitations of attachments, clinging, fears, and so on. Then the fourth point, Jigten Sungong points out, is that in order to achieve easy enlightenment, we need to rely upon a qualified teacher, Lamin Naljor, or Guru Yoga. And here he points out there are four kinds of teachers that we all need to listen to. There's four kinds of teachers from whom we can learn enlightenment. The first and the best teacher is called Rangshin Lama in Tibetan. It means the natural teacher. This is the ultimate nature of our own mind. Whenever we want to learn what is enlightenment, the easiest and quickest way is we can sit down and meditate upon who am I, what am I, and dissolve the ordinary sense of self, step into the vastness of our being. Sometimes we call it the clear light, the radiant primordial nature in the new tantric tradition. So that's the ultimate teacher, the natural teacher, because it's something that's always there.
And some people achieve enlightenment without ever meeting a human teacher. In Buddhism we'd say they had met in previous lives, in this lifetime they're very ripe, and they sit down and they just happen to notice the true nature of their own mind. And noticing that, they achieve enlightenment. So we call that enlightenment the teacher, which is the ultimate nature of your own mind. And it's always there.
The second teacher is called Nyungwe Lama, which means a teacher which is our own experience. That is to say, you walk somewhere, you bump your head on something, and then you notice, be careful, better duck. In that same way, we can learn from our own suffering and from our own joys. We look at our sufferings. Why did they happen? And we sort it out. We look at our joys. Where did they come from? And we sort it out. So it's called Nyungwe Lama, learning to transform through your own experience. The third kind of teacher is called Kawe Lama, which means the teacher which is instruction. When Buddha died, someone said, "What will we do after you're gone? How will we see you?" He said, "No problem, just think over my teachings." But here, Kawe Lama doesn't mean just teachings of Buddha, but everything we have ever read or experienced that has had a transformative effect upon us. That is our personal Kawe Lama.
Many things can have a transformative effect on us. In the field of religion, in addition to Buddhism, there's Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, and Islam. All the major religions share similar teachings about the golden rule of love. Love thy neighbor, and do unto others what you would have them do unto you. Transformative insights can also come from philosophy, as exemplified by Pythagoras, Socrates, and Plato, or science, as exemplified by Einstein, Newton, and Galileo. Great art can inspire us, such as the Sistine Chapel ceiling by Michelangelo, or Nicholas Roerich paintings, or the Mona Lisa by Da Vinci. As can great music, such as that by Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven. Esoteric wisdom can expand our consciousness, such as teachings brought forward by Helena Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, Helena and Nicholas Roerich, and Lucille Cederkrans. The beauty, majesty, and quiet peacefulness of nature can touch our hearts and open our minds. And the lives of outstanding people such as Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King, or perhaps someone in our own family, can inspire us to attempt more goodness in our own lives. And there are ideas which can inspire us and light the way, like one world, one life, one humanity. A vast array of things can have a transformative effect on us. From religion, philosophy, science, art, music, esoteric wisdom, meditation, yoga, nature, and people whose lives inspire us. All of these and more can be for us the teacher, which is instruction. And sometimes transformation comes in ways we would hardly imagine.
Like, for instance, Tsongkhapa achieved enlightenment not through meditation, although he did about 15 or 20 years of meditation, not through intense yoga, although he did many years of yoga, not through study, although he did many years of study. He walked out of his meditation cave, he sat down between meditation sessions and started reading a book. And a fly came along and lighted upon the line he was reading. And just watching the way the fly, just suddenly, that threw him completely into enlightenment. So Kawe Lama, for him, his teacher was a fly. The instruction came from this fly. But that idea is there in Buddhism. The Kawe Lama, the Lama which is the instruction, can come from a book, from a bridge, from a pet or an animal, in Tsongkhapa's case, enlightened by a fly. It said Naropa was enlightened by a sandal because his teacher got angry at him, picked up his shoe and hit him across the head as hard as he could with him and knocked him unconscious. And then unconscious he achieved enlightenment. So we could say that shoe is like a reincarnation of a Dalai Lama or a similar kind of being.
The fourth kind of teacher is the living teachers, the human teachers, the Sawa Tangyupe Lama. These are the beings, the people from whom we receive our own personal direct instruction. By relying upon these four kinds of teachers, then we lead a transformative life, and we find our way to enlightenment. We are guided toward enlightenment. Then the fifth and final practice in Tibetan is called Kunlong Ngo. Kunlong means always having good motivation in everything we do. Ngo means at the end of doing something, always to have dedication that gives away any sense of self in that, and that dedicates all the benefit to others. So in this way, Jigden Sungun, said that through these 5 applications, we can quickly and easily achieve enlightenment in one lifetime. This teaching on easy enlightenment has been updated in many ways, and has come through many newer Menga, or oral transmissions, reinterpretations. But the path to easy enlightenment remains as strong and as easy as it ever was. Thank you very much.